Hello, everyone. I'm Dian Griesel, and this is the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. And we're going to be talking about money today in the sense of we get it, we want to keep it, we want to think about ways that maybe we can leave wealth for other people in the future. And there's all kinds of things that go into that. And today, my guest is Lisa Stone. She is with Bernstein Private, I want to make sure I get this right, Bernstein Private Wealth Management. And she is a financial advisor and she's a principal there. And we're not going to give any investment advice or anything along those lines, but I want you to be thinking about the idea of money and how do you make it last. So we're going to talk about that in general terms today. But Lisa's a pretty fascinating person. I met her through a good friend who I've interviewed in the past, Anthony Solano. And so we're just going to get right into it. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So what is a financial advisor?
Good question. I think it is a broad term and it can mean lots of things to lots of people. But I see my role is about helping my clients plan for the future and to take emotion out of the process of managing their wealth.
Emotion.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I bet that falls into it a lot.
It absolutely does. And unfortunately, as investors, we are hardwired to make bad investment decisions.
That's a very, I want to get right into when I reached out to you originally, the big thing I wanted to talk about, which is going to bring us back to those bad investment decisions, is in the financial world, which I think is a phrase that can translate into every aspect of business, is the know your customer rule. It's a big one. If someone ever has trouble in the financial world, it's usually that someone says, well, they didn't know me in some way. What does that mean to you, the know your customer rule?
Well, at the first level, it's just about the basic biographical data, which is required by legal and compliance for all investment advisors. But for me and my team, it's a much more, I'd say, holistic definition. And it's really about understanding a client's kind of their hopes and dreams, what keeps them up at night, what their values are, how they feel about their family, how they feel about philanthropy, and really working over time to set a plan that's going to help them achieve their goals while still allowing them to sleep at night.
That's really interesting. That it's more than just you've got this much money in the bank, this is how long you want it to last. You're looking at a very big picture. And you mentioned earlier emotions. How do emotions play into, I could think of personally how my emotions might go into it, but what do you observe?
Well, I've learned a lot in my 21 years as a financial advisor working in that space. Money means different things to different people. For many people, it's the most important thing in the world to them. For many people, it's symbolic of their value, their accomplishments, their worth as a human, how they're respected, and a lot more than that. So it's really teasing out from people what this money means to them personally.
How do you go about doing that? That sounds like a lot of psychology involved in that. Is there a program, a format? Is there a way you go about asking those questions? Is it just plain getting together with someone a lot? What's involved there, Lisa?
Well, there's no shortcut to just spending time with people and talking and really listening. And people don't always say exactly what they mean. So it's also about reading between the lines. So that is a really important part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But at Bernstein, we also have a range of tools and processes to help us in this journey of understanding what a client's money means to them. So, for example, most of the relationships that I work with involve start with what we call a wealth forecasting analysis. And that's a proprietary system that we've built.
Mm-hmm.
It had already been established and enhanced many times when I joined the firm in 2004, and we've invested a tremendous amount in building it and enhancing it over the years. And what this tool does is allows us to plug in a series of data about the client's particular situation. So, income, expenses, the assets they have, any kind of trusts or other estate planning vehicles that they may have in place. And then on top of that, we overlay sort of everything we know as a firm about the capital markets. And it's unique in that we do not assume the future will be the same as the past. We are looking at
that's important.
Extremely important.
Number one rule in crisis management.
Right, exactly. If the future were the same as the past, we'd all know exactly what to do, right? So we look at the current market environment and then run through what I call a very souped up Monte Carlo analysis, which is a statistical analysis going through 10,000 potential paths of return based on everything we know about the current conditions in the market, but also what we know about how different asset classes and other factors are correlated with one another. And then we generate 10,000 potential outcomes to create a whole range of potential returns. And this tool allows us to work with our clients in dimensioning how much risk they're comfortable taking because we can actually look at it in numbers. It helps us to think through different estate planning strategies, to recommend different ideas, maybe for philanthropy or for transferring assets to their loved ones, whether it's children or grandchildren or anyone else, and really pre-experience what the future may look like. Because in my opinion, it's meaningless to ask somebody, what's your risk profile? What's your tolerance for risk? I always say everyone has an unlimited tolerance for volatility when the market's going up. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So.
Wow, that is a constant truism. Oh, they only see the upside.
Right. So my job is as much about pulling
every time I see a meme stock.
Yes. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. So, my job is often pulling people back when they have what I'll call some irrational exuberance, but also sometimes encouraging people to take more risk. Whether that's because they really don't have an option, they're not going to be able to not outlive their money if they don't take more risk. Or, perhaps there is a section of their wealth that they've really allocated to grandkids. And so the time horizon for that pool of money is much longer than it is for the client. So in that case, maybe they can afford to live through a little more ups and downs or less liquidity or, whatever the recommendation may be.
I'm curious, you talked about emotions and people don't always say what they mean. And I've made a career on deciphering that for people in all kinds of situations. So it's fascinating to me. So when you're looking at things and you're looking at loading someone's information into this program that you've developed at Bernstein, how much of your assessments that you do are quantitative versus qualitative, or is it kind of like a blend with everything?
Of course, the answer, it's a blend with everything. And it's, just to be clear, it's not, sort of plugging data into the system is the least of the process. That's the easy part. That any, online tool could do. But it's first really understanding what, what their story is. It's the backstory, what their goals are. And then when we, set up the analysis, we can run through a number of different scenarios. So a lot of the art of the scenarios is understanding what would be most relevant to them. So maybe it's about, let's look at, de-risking their portfolio. Maybe they've always been really aggressive. And what this analysis is going to show is that they can afford to take some risk off the table and still have plenty of money for the rest of their life. Maybe it's about selling a business or selling a home or, realizing some philanthropic goal that they didn't, realize they had the capacity to do. One of the core outputs of this analysis can be what we call their core assets. So we have the concept of core and surplus. So core is what, I guess in the mainstream may be called their number. So what is the number that you, Diane, need to make sure that you can live comfortably the way you want to live, whatever that means to you. It might mean millions of dollars a year, and it might mean under $100,000 a year. But what do you need to live comfortably for the rest of your life, no matter what happens in the market, no matter if we have a recession or hyperinflation or a stock market crash or all of the above or all of the above multiple times. So making sure you're
You
good.
mean like the last 20 years?
Right. And, and incredible markets too. So first, figuring out what is your core, and that is also based upon your age, the actuarial tables. You may tell me in this process of getting to know you that you have maybe you have a medical condition and you don't expect to live to your regular life expectancy. Maybe in the course of getting to know you, I understand you have a disabled loved one, and you need to provide for that person for the rest of their life, which may be much longer than your life. But once we know what that core number is, we then have the concept of surplus. And surplus is, that's the money you can think about differently. And differently might mean you just take more risk with it because you can sleep at night knowing that your core portfolio is secured. Or maybe surplus is suddenly you realize you can help your kids out or your grandkids or some other individual. Or maybe it's supporting the causes that you care about, or a combination of all of that.
It's very interesting, and it is very psychological what you're doing on a daily basis. And one of the things that always fascinates me when I speak with people, I know there's the people that at one extreme fall into, no, I came into this world with nothing. No matter what I make, I'm going out with nothing. I'm going to spend it all. This is my ride.
I have a bunch of those.
And then there's the other side that no matter what they're making, they're like, no, it's all about generational wealth. I need to create generational wealth. I mean, and I'm sure there's the whole range in the middle, because those are like a pendulum.
And another fun fact is, in my experience, everything you said is true, and there is zero correlation to where they fall on that spectrum and how much money they have.
That's very interesting.
One of the really fascinating things about this business.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is. People are endlessly fascinating. That is one of the great things about this career. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with someone I haven't met before or haven't met in a capacity as a financial advisor, and we have the initial conversation, some people, right away they come in, they have a folder full of statements, or they email us everything in advance or upload it through our secure website. Some people want to meet first before they share any of the details. And sometimes it's very hard to get them to just give me an idea of how much they have. And of course, at some point, I need to know that.
Right.
And oftentimes people will, sort of express reservations that they don't have enough money to be my client, and they know that they don't have as much as our other clients, and are they going to get the same attention? I mean, spoiler alert, the answer is yes, but and sometimes
yes, they're going to get
the same attention. But that's neither here nor there. But the sometimes they come in and from the way they're talking, you would think they're Jeff Bezos. There's
right.
they're like, we've done a ton of planning, and I want to buy a home in Florida and a home in Colorado, and I also want to establish residency overseas in case something happens here. I want a golden passport to Portugal or wherever. And then when you finally look at their statements, it's like, you can't even afford where you're living, much less, investing for generational goals, multi-generational goals, or multiple homes. So it's people have very different views about what a lot is and what's enough.
Those are two big words, a lot and what's enough.
Right.
And, I recently interviewed an actuary, and we were talking about actuarial tables, like how insurance companies make money. So how do they decide when we're going to live to? Like, if we all knew, it's that huge question, what's enough based on how long we're going to be here? Right. Or are we going to walk out and not we, is someone going to walk out and, trip on the sidewalk tomorrow? I'm a perfect example of that.
I've been known to trip on the sidewalk.
Hopefully not anymore. Right. Or are you going to be one of those people that, is 100 years old? It's such an interesting question and variable.
When I was talking about our wealth forecasting analysis, it is an interesting point that while we do rely partially on actuarial tables to determine what one's core requirements are, we do tack on a few years because a sad statement on our society, but high net worth people tend to live longer than the standard actuarial table. So we definitely add years for planning purposes. That's
interesting, because I actually read something not too long ago that said the opposite. And but what they were doing was, it was probably a breakout of those that were into extreme sports, because people that, were in, more wealthy were more likely to do, heli skiing or fly their own plane or, So I'm sure, like in anything with insurance, you take out all the things they ask.
Right.
Do you let your teenagers drive you in their car?
Right. I think that is probably, a small share of the data, and high net worth people tend to, have healthier lifestyles. Right. They have access to better medical care, so on and so forth.
So I'm curious, did you always know you were going to go down this career path?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
not. It was, if you had asked me as a kid, or even in college, or even in my first career, whether I would one day be a financial advisor, I would have thought it was the craziest thing in the world. So it was the furthest thing from my mind, literally.
And how did this come about then? What were you doing?
So I went to a women's college. I majored in African history. I think at the time really what I was doing in college was, following my bliss and just studying something a topic that I found interesting that I knew very little about. With
big continent.
Yeah, big continent.
Continent, lots of countries. Lots to study.
And not something I learned a lot about before college. So I just took that old cliche of, study whatever you're interested in, the rest will fall into place, quite literally. And I guess I thought might work for a not-for-profit or some kind of, global quasi-government organization. And I spent my junior year of college in Sierra Leone in West Africa, and
Wow.
which was very fascinating.
Wow.
And while I was there, I had the opportunity to meet lots of people who were in the diplomatic corps and worked for relief organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly figured out that that was probably not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way too impatient and high energy, I think, for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I graduated from college with really little idea of what I was going to do. I ended up being back in New York when I hadn't planned on that. So suddenly I had to find a job.
Did you grow up in New York?
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay.
Born and raised. I was quite an outlier in that I actually got married in college.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated. I was married to my first husband, suddenly looking for a job. And through a series of twists and turns, my resume ended up on the desk of a woman who was the only salesperson at a startup fintech company, but that was before it was called fintech.
Yeah.
It was that long ago. And I
still remember using the first Bloomberg terminals and LexisNexis on the green screen.
It was back
and the big
in those
Nelson
days.
directories.
It was back in those days for sure. And she hired me as her sales assistant, and our company, it was a 10 or 11 person company, and it was started by a trader, a foreign exchange options trader who thought he could come up with a better tool for pricing foreign exchange options. And his outlook was that, it was too hard to find people who actually knew the subject matter. So he just was looking for a particular personality type, and he could teach us the rest. So I became the sales assistant. And by the time I left that company, I was running global sales. And we were, 150 people all over the world. So I really grew up in that industry. And then I worked in another larger fintech company. And I was really contacted out of the blue by Bernstein. And I did my best to explain to the recruiter that he didn't understand what I did because I didn't know anything about investing and I wasn't interested in that. And I didn't know any wealthy people. And even if I did, I would never feel comfortable going after my friends and family for their money. So no, thank you, click. But he was persistent. He wanted to make his commission. And he and the firm had always had a little bit of an elusive feel to me. It was one of the few companies that I had not ever sold a system to. It was very kind of insular, and I knew it was known as like a very hard driving organization of very, very smart people. So I was kind of curious. So I agreed to go in and talk to the gentleman who hired me. And he spent probably about 20 minutes telling me, how hard a job it is and how no one really succeeds. And, the success rate is very low. And he, at that point, I had 2 young kids, and I was the breadwinner, and I had one kid in private school, a full-time nanny. My husband at the time was in graduate school, and I was footing the bill for that. So I had to make money, and I was happy in the career that I was in. So I got on the subway from Bernstein, went home, and I called up the person who had interviewed me, and I said, "Yeah, just letting you know, I thought about it, and I don't really think this is for me. So, but thank you." And I hung up, and then about 20 minutes later, the phone rang, and he said, I really think this is for you.
Even though I spent 20 minutes telling you you're likely going to fail.
Right, exactly. And he did. He very much appealed to my competitive nature. So he said, the next step in the process is we have a test that all candidates have to take. And it was it was very, very interesting. It was like a combination sort of IQ test, but also like a Myers-Briggs. So it was sort of like personality and intelligence, or some type of intelligence. I wouldn't say all types of intelligence, but he said, most people don't make it past that stage anyway. So why don't you just come in and take the test, and you probably won't get called back anyway. So of course, at that point, I'm like, all right, I'll come take your stupid test. So I came in, and I really came in with the mindset that, because it was a lot of the questions were really about your values, kind of, and how your outlook in life. And so I said, I'm not going to try and fake this one out. I'm just going to answer these questions honestly with what I think, and let the cards fall where they may, because frankly, I could see that Bernstein was a very intense culture, and I was already happy where I was. So I said, this would be a really unpleasant place to work if you didn't fit in. So I'm just going to be myself, and see where it goes. And one thing led to another, and I was they made an offer, and I have said almost from day one that this was the fantasy job that I would have never, ever been able to articulate in college, or even a month before starting the job. So it's been an incredible journey.
No, wait a second. We can't just jump from someone saying to you, most people don't make it, you're not going to have a chance, to you getting the job, to this being a fantasy job. We need to find the in-between. What was year one like?
Well, let me go back one step. So I had been selling financial technology to banks for 13 years.
Yeah.
I did really love that career, but one of the things that was becoming problematic was the environment in the banking world. I was starting to see a lot of mergers, and it was getting in the way of my business, because I would work on a deal for a year or more, and then just when they were about to sign a contract, they would merge with a
someone
bank
who
that already had it. And I didn't like the feeling of not feeling like I had control over my destiny. I felt like things like that were outside of my control. And the thing I love the most were the people and the relationships. And even if you're selling to a global mega cap bank, at the end of the day, you're meeting with people who are making decisions. And that was the most enjoyable part of what I did. I had sort of had this process where I thought about, in my fantasy, like what would be, if I was going to make a career change, what would be really like a fun job? And I always thought like it would be a dream to be a therapist. And I
sounds like you are in a way.
Bingo. So I did a little investigation, and just at that time, going back to school for a graduate degree, and frankly, the income potential of that field were just, it was not feasible given the financial responsibilities I had. So that kind of, I put that on the side, and little did I know that Bernstein, I feel like a lot of my job is working as a family therapist. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. It's interesting when you say working like a family therapist. We saw those of us who watched the TV show Succession, and now we're watching the LVMH world and the psychology of who might be that successor. How will that wealth transfer? Will the next person be able to take it to the next level, or just plain maintain it? I mean, if in the case of like an LVMH or something like that, where you're just talking about massive amounts of, I saw a chart the other day. I can't even remember how many companies were in that chart.
A lot.
Yeah. It's such an interesting idea, because you hear the expressions, and I'm curious of your thoughts on it, where it says, the first generation makes it, the second generation spends it,
and third generation loses it.
Loses it.
Right. Well, there's, these stereotypes exist for a reason. There's some truth to them, but of course not always. I'm probably, I have to confess, the only person in financial services in this country who has not seen Succession, so I can't comment on that. I don't know.
It's a good one.
Yeah. No, I've heard it's great. But I think a lot of how we think about it, it's really it's a very personal business, and it's about really knowing all the players. And within a family, even within, one generation of a family, but certainly when, I'm working with families that were on to G4 and
as in fourth generation.
Fourth generation.
Yeah.
And we have, active dialogues and relationships with at least 3 of those 4. Fourth might still be in diapers, but, and it's, people have very different ideas about, what they want to do, what the money means to them, whether they are entitled to it or it's, a privilege or a burden. I work with lots of young people, or even not so young people who they really see this generational wealth as a burden. And they don't want to have anything to do with it. And it can be a big challenge to bring them into the fold of the family because the older generation may be struggling to try and get them involved in whether it's the family business or maybe there's a family foundation or some other philanthropic pool that they want the next generation to, if not take over, at least get involved with. And sometimes they just don't want to have anything to do with it.
I was just reading a couple of articles on that, and they were and the general gist was, I really don't want your house. I don't want to work for your business. I'm on my own path. And I
definitely don't want your tchotchkes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the house. Definitely not the, ceramics collection.
Yeah.
Definitely not the china.
So I imagine, depending on what stage or phase you step into someone's life, and let's talk about that. At what phase or stage should someone start to think about getting involved with a personal wealth manager?
I think it should start, I think people should start learning about, the basics about finance and investing, as early as grade school. High school, and each family is different, but I think it's important to just start to understand some of the basics and at least not be afraid of it. And I think working with as soon as you're responsible for managing any pool of wealth, even if it's a very small pool. It may not, Bernstein may not be the right fit, but there are financial advisors of all different scales. And it's kind of like asking, at what point should I start seeing a doctor? It's even if you're young and healthy, you probably shouldn't be diagnosing yourself.
It's interesting that you said that you think it should start, as young as elementary school. And one of the things in the education system, which is kind of a segue here, but I can't believe home economics is not taught anymore, that kind of thing, because I don't know if you're old enough, but I remember you had to learn how to take a recipe for 4 and serve 30.
Right.
How would you fractionalize up all the ingredients in that recipe? And how would you go buy more? Or how would you keep a checkbook? I mean, I've seen it with our own children. Like, what's a checkbook? What do you use checks for? Now, I'm super old school. I do like a checkbook. I don't love all the electronic stuff for everything. For some things, I certainly do. But like, are checkbooks going away? And if they are, shouldn't you still know how to balance out that statement when you see it? I mean, I've had, checks go through the Federal Reserve or whatever I've had plenty of checks over the years that somebody juxtaposed 2 numbers or moved the decimal point in the wrong direction. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm feeling extra rich today. Or what the heck happened to my money?
Right.
But it's things that people don't think about checking anymore. They just, no pun on the word checking, they just trust this system.
Right. And I think, on the subject of checks, checks probably are going away because they, at this day and age, there's a lot of fraud risk associated with checks.
I've had that.
Yeah, lots of people have. So we try and really encourage our clients to move away from checks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to your larger point, technology has really changed the way all of us relate to money. And, many people don't even deal with cash anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it can feel very abstract, I think, when there's nothing to touch and
I
look at.
think it's super abstract. If you think about it, if you said to a lot of people that just hand their credit card to something without much thought,
Mm-hmm.
do you know how much money you spent this week?
That's it.
Meanwhile, I remember getting my check when I was 20, 18 years old, taking my check. I would convert it into cash or something, and this envelope would have the rent in it. This one would have my, portion of the electric or the phone bill, or, I knew exactly how it was all breaking down. And I think that skill is going to be one interesting thing looking forward into the future for people, because I think the need for a financial advisor is going to come in a lot earlier for a lot of people, but it's going to be more educational on so many levels instead of just advisory as well.
Yeah, and I think there are all kinds of educational programs out there for young people to learn the basics. But I think, everyone should be getting professional advice on their wealth. And when the amount of wealth starts to grow, the complexities are greater. So it's not just about, risk profile and stocks and bonds, but it's a lot about the intersection of the planning and the wealth, and making sure that, not just is your money working for you, but is it invested in a way that is consistent with what you're trying to accomplish with it? Is it invested in a way that's consistent with your personal values? Is it, a lot of the time people feel, and it can be a challenge, they don't feel ready to transfer wealth to their kids or grandkids. But at the same time, they certainly don't want to pay taxes that they don't have to pay. And sometimes the answer is philanthropy, which can be a very rewarding part of my job, helping people sort of realize they can do more to help the causes they care about. Sometimes the answer might be just spending more money. A lot of the time I'm encouraging clients to it's not my job to tell them to give it away, but if you have plenty, why don't you spend go buy that second home, go take that vacation. Do things with your family while you're alive to enjoy it. Take everyone on vacation.
Right. It's interesting because you obviously probably have to address the idea of alive and dead.
Oh, yeah.
And I bet that's a topic. If you just look at advertising, nobody wants to accept that dead part.
It's incredible. People really, we all know that people don't like talking about death and dying. I have been consistently surprised in my career about the lengths people will go to deny that one. We're very
fact of life.
The one guarantee in life. One of the few things that are guaranteed in life. We in our business we can't. We're very limited in how we use the word guarantee, but death, that is a guarantee, and. It's not something I've learned. It's not something you can sort of, with everyone, sort of beat around the bush or hint at. Sometimes you really have to be blunt about it.
Right.
And we can run the analyses that we do. We can run them out as long as we want. But when you get to the point where the person is 110, it starts to get a little far-fetched. But sometimes it's assuring, you have to show them you're going to be fine. You're going to have more money than you ever will spend, even if you live to 110. Sometimes people want that level of assurance. And some people do live to 110, and more people are. So it's not the most far-fetched thing in the world.
Yes, I learned that actuarial tables for both the IRS and Social Security actually go out to 120.
You know what? I believe it.
I don't think I'd want to be one of those people, but
Who knows? Science is evolving quickly, so.
if you were going to step back without giving any investment advice, but what would you advise people today to think about for their future? What are the most important things people need to either compartmentalize or think about?
I mean, it's really, a lot of it is just the basics. It's, living within your means. That is a big challenge. And, to the earlier point, when you don't have a concrete sense of what you're making or how much wealth you have and what you're spending, it's not always black and white what living within your means means.
That one's always fascinating because I'll talk to some of our children or interns that I have working for me, and they're like, well, I'm going to make this much and it's going to last me my whole life. And I'm like, well, if you bought 2 houses, it might not.
Right.
Because those houses come with gas bills and they come with electric bills and they come with tax bills and
Right. Homes are expensive
the lack
to
of
maintain.
understanding of that you can blow through any amount of money and end up broke.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people miss that point.
Yeah.
And I bet you see it a lot.
Yeah. And just, planning without, I want everyone to enjoy the present and live their life and at the same time, planning for the future is important, and saving for retirement or the future, whatever that might mean to you.
Just out of curiosity, retirement. Are you noticing shifts in how people are looking at retirement these days?
I mean, I've only been doing this for 21 years, so I don't know if there's been that much of a generational shift. I think I see a lot of people who work into their 80s or even 90s and they never want to retire. I have a lot of clients who might be partners at law firms or accounting firms where they have required retirement ages, and that can be really hard because they may not be ready to leave. Then I have people who, they have an age in their head and they're like that, they want to stop working when they're 55 and so it's very, I think one of the things that really differentiates the work that we do at Bernstein is that it's very tailored to the individual client situation. There's nothing formulaic or cookie cutter about it.
I can't imagine there could be.
Yeah, no.
It's real.
Two people are alike. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how differently, everybody looks at life, longevity, money, family, spending, living, vacationing, philanthropy.
Yeah.
All the things you're talking about today. It's such a broad, encompassing perspective.
It is. I mean, an interesting aspect of sort of the evolution of our business is, I'd say especially over the past decade, we've built out a very skilled team of colleagues who are trained in what we call family engagement. And it's really about facilitating very personal conversations within families about their values and, if there's a lot of family wealth, maybe setting a mission statement for the family.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Governance around how money works in the family. Kind
of setting up your corporate mission statement, like viewing your family as a entity.
Right. Exactly. It's
a very interesting concept.
It's really fascinating.
That's got to get conversations going.
Oh,
oh, wow.
Really? Yeah, it does. And it gives, it's oftentimes I'll be involved in the process, but really a little bit more on the outside of it. And it really helps me get a bigger picture, a better picture sometimes of what my clients are really thinking.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Sometimes, bringing someone else into the mix will tease out information that, I think I'm a good listener, but something I never heard before.
So I want to go backwards in this conversation a little. Earlier, you mentioned the word competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here across from you looking at those arms that are truly sculpted. So we need to get a little personal here. I know you're a runner.
Mm-hmm.
You are clearly an athlete. The last time I saw you, you were bicycle riding home when all I wanted to do was get into bed. And I think it was a Thursday night, so I was really ready to call it quits.
Yeah.
Tell me about this fitness routine that keeps you going and energized and ties into your competitive nature.
Yeah. Well, mostly it helps tame some of my, my very vast amount of energy. So I've been a runner for almost my entire life.
Really?
And that's been a really important part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I had something happen to me very, pretty early in life, after my freshman year in college, where I had been a runner, not a very competitive runner or anything. I was, on the track team, but I was never one of the better people on the team. But it was something I enjoyed, and I enjoyed the community, and just mostly I enjoyed running by myself. And I was in a terrible car accident, and my leg was shattered. And it was really a pivot point in my life, because it was, sort of a wake-up call about my mortality, and having some, appreciation of my physical being, and just an appreciation of what a privilege it is to be healthy and able to move my body and do things I wanted to do. And so it took a long time to come back from that. But
Wow.
I had done one marathon sort of as a high school senior project. And when I finished that, I was pretty slow, and I finished that. I got across the finish line. I lied down immediately, which is the worst thing you can do. I almost was not able to get back up. And I said to myself, I'm never doing that again. Check, I can check that off my list. And it was only after I came back from the car accident, and it took some time, that I really, I went to watch the New York City Marathon, and I just was looking at those people, and I wanted to do it. And I've run pretty much every year since then, and a few others, and a few other longer races. So it's been a huge source of joy in my life.
Runner.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I can still call myself that. I'm not sure how much longer, but I still think of myself as a marathon runner.
What does your training routine look like?
For marathon?
For anything.
Anything.
To get those arms and legs that you have.
Well, thank you. You're very sweet. I do lots of things now. So I do yoga, I hike, I bike, I do it's just a whole, so I try not to put too much wear and tear on myself just from running. But now, the marathon, the New York City Marathon is coming up. It's always the first Sunday in November. So
And you're running that.
I touch wood. I hope so. That's my plan. And I never like to jinx it by saying yes.
I think we're going to have to call this touch brains.
Yeah. We'll call this wood
here.
Yeah. So, around this time, I'll start incorporating some longer runs into my training. So it's, it doesn't really disrupt my life much, because I've been doing it. It's just a part of my sort of annual routine. And so, I'll do pretty much the same thing I would do any other time of the year, except on, once a week, I'll start folding in a longer run, and I'll build up to maybe 2 or 3, maybe 20-mile runs for training. But at this
2 or
point,
3 20-mile runs in a week?
No, not in a week.
Oh.
Not in a week. Over the course.
I remember
of
I had to contact you on a Saturday night because I was mixing up all these numbers of how much you run.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think that was a
not in a
late
week.
night text. Lisa, how many miles did you say?
But yeah, I think that was after that crazy one in South Africa. So so I'll do a few of those.
Wow.
Basically, I just think I also have a lot of muscle memory. So I'm kind of at this stage about on a less is more training program. So I think it's important to get the long runs in. But other than that, I run maybe two other days during the week and just kind of cross train the other days. But mostly I do it because I love it.
Well, it shows the benefit of it, and all that competitive energy gets channeled into your professional life, your personal life. It creates your sense of excellence that I get from you.
I think it's important to have a whole diversity of, diversification is a word we use a lot in this business. And I think it's important in one's life to have diversification, to have, multiple sources of things that bring you joy. And, there may come a time where I can't run anymore. And I, already been developing a whole other range of interests and passions that I can turn to if the running is no longer an option.
Oh my gosh, that could have been a whole topic too, but unfortunately we're out of time.
Wow. And I was worried about 55 minutes, so it flew by.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Diane.
Lisa.
It was a pleasure, and it was really fun to do this. So thank you for encouraging me to do it.
I'm glad you did. I want to thank you all for watching. This has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. My guest today is Lisa Stone. You're going to be able to find all kinds of information below about her, but she's at Bernstein Private Wealth Management, but there'll be all kinds of links to get in touch with her if you'd like. And we've been recording in really cool Manhattan Center, which I love being here. We're in TV2. Please check out everything going on here and hit subscribe. And thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Hit subscribe.